Life had always been different for Alex Mitchell. Growing up as the police chief's son in the quiet town of Pine Valley meant he never had to wait in line, never had to worry about getting into trouble, and certainly never had to face the consequences of his actions. At 17, he walked the halls of Pine Valley High like he owned them, his father's badge casting a long shadow that kept teachers and students alike from crossing his path. His morning routine was always the same, cruising into the senior parking lot in his glossy black Dodge Charger, a 16th birthday gift that came right after he'd gotten his third speeding ticket torn up by one of his father's officers. The car's engine would rumble through the lot, turning heads and parting crowds like some kind of teenage Moses, though fear rather than respect guided their movements. The privilege wasn't subtle, and Alex knew it. When his math teacher caught him cheating on a test last semester, the conversation quickly shifted from detention to finding a solution that works for everyone after one quick call to his father. When he broke the window of the science lab during an after-school prank, the school board mysteriously found room in their budget for repairs without any questions asked. Even local businesses treated him differently. The coffee shop always had his order ready before he walked in, though he rarely bothered to pay full price. The movie theater never checked his ID for R-rated films, and the local diner somehow always had a table available, even during the busy Sunday rush. It wasn't just special treatment. It was like the whole town operated on Alex Mitchell rules. His father, Chief Robert Mitchell, wasn't blind to his son's behavior, but he saw it through the lens of a man who believed his position earned his family certain perks. "That's just how things work, son," he'd say during their Sunday afternoon barbecues, where half the police force would show up with their families, laughing at Alex's latest escapades like they were charming childhood stories rather than growing concerns. Alex's mother had passed away when he was young, and perhaps that's why his father struggled to say no to him. The chief's study was filled with photos of her, all frozen in time, all showing the same warm smile that Alex could barely remember. Sometimes, late at night, the chief would sit in there looking at those photos, wondering if he was doing right by her memory. But by morning, any doubts would be pushed aside by the daily routine of running the town's police force and maintaining the careful balance of power he'd built. At school, Alex had his own circle of followers, not friends exactly, but other kids who knew the value of staying close to power. They laughed at his jokes, backed up his stories, and most importantly, helped him maintain his image as the untouchable prince of Pine Valley. Together, they ruled their small kingdom from the back tables of the cafeteria, watching as other students carefully chose paths that wouldn't bring them too close. But power, especially the kind that isn't earned, has a way of corrupting even the smallest choices. For Alex, it started with little things: cutting in lunch lines, borrowing homework he never intended to return, making comments just loud enough to be heard but not quite loud enough to be called out. Each small act of entitlement went unchallenged, and with each passing day, the line between right and wrong became a little more blurry. What Alex didn't realize was that his kingdom was built on shifting sands. In small towns like Pine Valley, stories have a way of collecting like snow, growing deeper and heavier until something finally causes them to slide. And all it would take was one person, one moment, one decision to start an avalanche that would change everything. That moment was coming, and neither Alex's father's badge nor his carefully cultivated image would be enough to stop it. The late afternoon shift at McDonald's wasn't anyone's idea of a dream job, but for Raj Kumar, it was a stepping stone. The 16-year-old honor student had started working there 3 months ago, joining the ranks of teenagers in grease-stained uniforms and slip-resistant shoes. His mother worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment, and Raj was determined to help however he could. The restaurant's familiar smell of fries and cleaning solution had become part of his daily routine. Between taking orders and wiping down tables, he'd sneak glances at his physics textbook, propped carefully away from any food splatter. His coworkers often teased him about studying during breaks, but they admired his dedication. "Future doctor," they'd call him, and Raj would just smile, too focused on his goals to mind the nickname. That particular Tuesday seemed like any other until Alex Mitchell walked in with his usual group. The police chief's son had a way of making his presence known, speaking a little too loudly, laughing a little too hard. Raj had heard about him from other students at school, though they rarely shared classes. Raj was in all advanced placement courses, while Alex was known more for his social status than his academic achievements. "Hey, new kid," Alex called out, leaning against the counter with an air of ownership that made other customers step back. "How about hooking us up with some free food? You know, for keeping the peace in town." His friends snickered behind him, phones already out, ready to record whatever happened next. Raj kept his voice steady, professional. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Would you like to place an order?" He'd been warned about Alex by other workers, told about how the last person who'd refused him had mysteriously lost their job within a week. Alex's smile didn't waver, but something cold crept into his eyes. "Come on, don't be like that. My dad's the police chief. We take care of people who take care of us." The threat was subtle but clear, wrapped in a friendly tone that made it somehow worse. "I really can't," Raj repeated, his heart pounding, but his voice remaining calm. "It would cost me my job." He needed this job, for his mother, for their future, for the college applications that would start next year. The next few minutes stretched like hours. Alex and his friends ordered their food, but they weren't done. They spilled their drinks, accidentally, scattered their fries across the floor, and filmed Raj cleaning up their mess. Their laughter bounced off the walls as they posted the videos online, adding captions that turned simple work into public humiliation. Other employees watched from behind the counter, their faces showing a mix of sympathy and relief that they weren't the targets. The shift manager suddenly found paperwork that needed immediate attention in the back office. No one wanted to risk becoming Alex's next focus. But Raj kept working, kept cleaning, kept his dignity intact. He thought about his mother, who had left everything behind in India to give him a better life. She taught him that real strength wasn't in pushing others down, but in standing tall when others tried to push you. Word spread quickly through the school's social circles about the new kid who dared to say no to Alex Mitchell. Some whispered that Raj was either very brave or very foolish. Others watched the online videos and felt a growing discomfort with Alex's behavior, though few dared to say so publicly. What no one knew was that this interaction was just the beginning. Alex Mitchell had found a new target, someone who didn't fit into his carefully controlled world of privilege and power. For him, Raj's quiet dignity was a challenge to everything he believed about how the world should work. And in Alex's world, challenges needed to be crushed. But sometimes the smallest acts of courage create ripples that turn into waves. Raj didn't know it yet, but by simply doing his job and standing his ground, he had set in motion events that would shake Pine Valley to its core. The question wasn't if things would change, but when, and who would be left standing when the dust settled. Over the next 2 weeks, Alex turned his attention to making Raj's life increasingly difficult. Every afternoon, like clockwork, he and his friends would show up at McDonald's during Raj's shift. What started as snide remarks had grown into something more calculated, more cruel. "Look who it is, guys," Alex would announce loudly whenever he walked in. "Our favorite employee of the month." His friends would snicker, phones already recording, ready to capture whatever happened next. They'd created a social media page dedicated to mocking Raj at work, filling it with edited clips and mean-spirited comments. The videos always showed the same thing: Raj cleaning up deliberately spilled drinks, picking up scattered food, or trying to mop floors that Alex and his friends had just tracked mud across. But they never showed how Alex would lean in close when no one was filming, whispering threats about what would happen if Raj complained to anyone. One particularly busy Saturday, Alex and his group occupied their usual corner booth for over 3 hours. They ordered the minimum amount of food required to stay, then took turns making messes. When other customers gave them disapproving looks, Alex would just smile and mention his father's name. That smile carried weight in Pine Valley, and people learned to look away. The restaurant manager, Mr. Thompson, saw everything but did nothing. He'd been running the place for 15 years and knew exactly how things worked in town. "Just keep your head down," he told Raj during a quiet moment. "It'll blow over eventually." But his eyes wouldn't meet Raj's when he said it, and they both knew it was a lie. Raj's coworkers started switching shifts to avoid working with him. Not because they disliked him, but because nobody wanted to be caught in Alex's crosshairs. The lunch rush became a lonely affair, with Raj handling multiple stations while trying to avoid Alex's latest attempts to provoke him. At school, the situation wasn't much better. Raj's locker was mysteriously damaged several times. His textbooks disappeared only to reappear in trash cans. People who used to study with him in the library suddenly had other commitments. The message was clear. Being Alex Mitchell's target meant being alone. But through it all, Raj kept showing up. He'd adjust his name tag, straighten his uniform, and face each shift with quiet determination. When customers asked how he stayed so calm, he'd just shrug and say, "The food still needs to get served." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was easier than explaining how his mother's sacrifices gave him the strength to endure. At home, Raj tried to hide what was happening. His mother worked long hours at the hospital as a nurse's aide, and he didn't want to add to her worries. But she noticed how he'd stopped talking about his day, how his usual cheerful stories about work had been replaced with careful silences. The breaking point came on a quiet Thursday evening. The dinner rush had ended, and Raj was restocking supplies when Alex and his friends walked in. Something was different this time. Their usual mocking laughter had an edge to it, and Alex's eyes held a look that made the other employees nervously retreat to the back. "Time to have a real talk," Alex announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, but quiet enough that his phone wouldn't pick it up clearly. "About respect and knowing your place in this town." What happened next would change everything in Pine Valley. Not because it was dramatically different from Alex's usual behavior, but because this time, someone else was watching. Someone with a camera of their own, someone who'd seen enough. Someone who was about to show the town exactly who Alex Mitchell really was. As Alex and his friends surrounded Raj behind the restaurant after his shift, none of them noticed the car idling quietly in the drive-through lane, its dashboard camera recording every word, every action, every moment of truth about power and privilege in their small town. The video that would emerge from this encounter would do more than just go viral. It would shatter the careful illusion that Alex and his father had built over years of unchecked authority. The evening air was crisp as Raj finished his shift, his backpack heavy with homework he'd need to catch up on. The McDonald's parking lot was mostly empty, except for Alex's black Charger lurking near the dumpsters. Something about the scene made Raj's stomach tighten. This wasn't just another day of harassment. "Hey." Alex's voice cut through the quiet. He wasn't alone. 4 of his friends emerged from around the corner, forming a loose circle. "We need to talk about respect." Alex's usual smirk was gone, replaced by something harder, colder. What none of them noticed was Lisa Chen in her old Toyota, waiting in the drive-thru for her daughter's usual after-practice meal. Her dashboard camera, installed after a fender bender last year, was still running. She'd seen Alex and his friends positioning themselves earlier, and something about it made her wait instead of driving away. "Look," Raj said calmly, though his heart was racing. "I'm just trying to do my job. That's all." He tried to step around them, but they closed ranks. His backpack suddenly felt like a target on his back. "See, that's your problem." Alex stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You think this is about some job? This is about knowing who runs things around here. My dad's the chief of police. Do you know what that means?" Before Raj could answer, one of Alex's friends grabbed his backpack, yanking it off his shoulders. The sound of his laptop hitting the pavement made Raj flinch. It had taken him months of savings to buy it for schoolwork. Stop. Raj's voice cracked as they started emptying his backpack, scattering his books and notes across the wet ground. Please, my mother helped me buy that laptop. Alex picked up the damaged laptop, turning it over in his hands. Should have thought about that before you decided to be difficult. Could have just given us the free food when we asked. Simple choice, really. In the Toyota, Lisa's hands shook as she recorded everything. She'd known Alex's father for years. Everyone in town did. But watching his son now, seeing the casual cruelty play out in real time, made her blood boil. My dad, Alex continued, dropping the laptop back to the ground and stepping on it. He teaches me about justice all the time. About consequences. This, he gestured to the scattered belongings. These are consequences. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Alex's friend Tommy decided to empty Raj's water bottle over his books. Another friend started filming, laughing about how this would make a great addition to their social media page. But they didn't notice Lisa stepping out of her car, her own phone now recording as backup. And what do you think your father would say about this kind of justice? Lisa's voice made them all freeze. She taught Alex in 3rd grade, back when he was just a kid with a badge-holding dad, not the bully he'd become. The color drained from Alex's face as he realized they weren't alone. His friends stopped laughing, suddenly very interested in their shoes. The phone that had been recording Raj's humiliation disappeared into someone's pocket. Mrs. Chen, Alex started, trying to find his usual confident tone. We were just showing everyone exactly who you are, Lisa finished for him. Don't worry, I got it all on video. Every word about your father, every threat, every moment of you destroying this young man's property. The air seemed to crackle with tension. Alex's face cycled through emotions, shock, anger, and finally, fear. Real fear, maybe for the first time in his life. His friends started backing away, sudden urgent text messages requiring their immediate attention elsewhere. Raj stood quietly, looking at his ruined belongings scattered across the pavement. But something had changed. The power dynamic that had seemed so unshakable just minutes before was crumbling, and everyone knew it. This ends now, Lisa said firmly, helping Raj gather his things. And just so we're clear, if anything happens to Raj, if either of you face any consequences from the police department, this video goes straight to the state police and every news outlet in the region. Lisa Chen didn't sleep that night. After making sure Raj got home safely, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the footage on her dashboard camera. Her finger hovered over the upload button for hours. As a teacher, she'd watched Alex Mitchell grow from a mischievous kid into something else entirely, and she felt partly responsible for staying silent so long. By morning, the video was everywhere. It started on local community Facebook groups, then spread to Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. People shared it with messages like, "Police chief's son shows true colors," and "Power corrupts in Pine Valley." The dashcam footage was crystal clear. Every thread, every mention of his father's position, every moment of destruction caught in high definition. Alex woke up to hundreds of notifications. His usual social media posts mocking Raj had backfired spectacularly. People were sharing them now as evidence of ongoing harassment. Former classmates began sharing their own stories in the comments. A girl from junior year wrote about how Alex had keyed her car after she refused to date him. A freshman described how Alex had threatened to have his father arrest the boy's dad if he didn't hand over his new gaming console. The high school hallways felt different that morning. Students who usually scrambled to get out of Alex's way now stared openly, phones recording his every move. His usual group of friends was nowhere to be seen. They'd all suddenly developed cases of food poisoning and stayed home. During third period, Alex was called to the principal's office. The local news had picked up the story, and reporters were gathering outside the school. Principal Roberts, who had overlooked Alex's behavior for years, now sat stern-faced behind his desk. "This isn't something we can sweep under the rug," the principal said, sliding a tablet across his desk showing the viral video. "The school board is meeting this afternoon to discuss your status here." Meanwhile, at the police station, Chief Mitchell was facing his own crisis. The state police had called, asking questions about patterns of behavior and abuse of power. Officers who had torn up Alex's speeding tickets were now writing detailed reports about those incidents, protecting themselves as the ship began to sink. Back at McDonald's, Raj arrived for his shift to find a crowd of supporters waiting. Regular customers had organized a fundraiser to replace his laptop. Local business owners, who had stayed quiet during Alex's reign of terror, now stepped forward with part-time job offers at better pay. The restaurant manager, Mr. Thompson, could barely look Raj in the eye. Local news crews set up cameras outside the police station and the high school. The story had grown beyond just Alex's behavior. People were asking questions about the whole system that had protected him. How many incidents had been covered up? How many victims had stayed quiet, fearing retaliation? By lunchtime, the Pine Valley Police Department issued a statement. Chief Mitchell was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The announcement hit the town like a thunderbolt. The untouchable Mitchell family was finally facing consequences. Alex spent that afternoon alone in his usual corner of the cafeteria. The silence around him was deafening. A few students whispered about karma, about how the tables had turned. But most just watched as the former prince of Pine Valley sat with his head down, untouched food growing cold on his tray. Lisa Chen watched it all unfold from her classroom, feeling both vindicated and sad. She taught in Pine Valley for 20 years, watching power shift and change. But this felt different, like a community finally waking up, finally finding its voice. As the sun set on that transformative day, Pine Valley buzzed with conversations about change, about justice, about standing up to power. The video hadn't just exposed Alex's behavior. It had cracked open the facade of the whole town, revealing the rot that privilege and unchecked authority had created. And in that crack, something new was beginning to grow. Hope for a different kind of community, one where justice meant more than just having the right last name. The domino effect of Lisa Chen's video continued to ripple through Pine Valley. As more people found their courage to speak up, the town's carefully maintained power structure began to crumble like a house of cards. The high school's hallways buzzed with newfound energy as students shared their own stories. A sophomore revealed how Alex had pressured him to write papers for the entire football team. A senior girl talked about how Alex had spread rumors about her after she reported him for cheating. Each story emboldened others to step forward, creating a flood of long-buried truths. Remember when the school's funding for art programs mysteriously disappeared? A teacher whispered during lunch break. Right after Alex got caught spray painting the gym. Others nodded, connecting dots they'd been too afraid to acknowledge before. The local coffee shop, once Alex's favorite spot for free drinks, became a gathering place for community discussions. People who'd lived in Pine Valley their whole lives sat together, sharing stories of times they'd witnessed injustice but stayed silent. The barista, who'd always given Alex free drinks, finally admitted she'd done it because her brother had once gotten a ticket for suspicious behavior after refusing Alex's demands. At the police station, officers who had once competed for Chief Mitchell's favor now faced uncomfortable questions from state investigators. Officer Thompson, a 20-year veteran, broke down during his interview. "We all knew," he admitted. "We just convinced ourselves it was easier to play along." The local newspaper, which had previously buried stories about Alex's misconduct, now ran a front-page series titled Power and Privilege in Pine Valley. They interviewed former students who had left town, unable to handle the pressure of living under the Mitchells' influence. Each story revealed a new layer of how deeply the abuse of power had affected the community. Social media groups dedicated to mocking Raj transformed overnight. His old videos, once filled with cruel comments, now showcased his dignity in the face of bullying. "Watch how he keeps his cool," someone commented. "That's real strength." The hashtag Stand with Raj started trending locally, then regionally. The school board meeting to discuss Alex's fate turned into a 5-hour marathon. Parents, teachers, and students lined up to speak. A middle school teacher described how she'd been pressured to change Alex's grades. A janitor talked about cleaning up messes Alex had deliberately made, knowing he couldn't complain without risking his job. But amidst all the anger and revelations, something unexpected happened. People began talking about healing, about making things right. The owner of the local bookstore suggested creating a community council to oversee police conduct. A group of students proposed an anti-bullying program that would address power dynamics and privilege. Lisa Chen watched it all unfold from her classroom, where she'd started hosting afternoon discussions about civic responsibility. "Change doesn't happen in big moments," she told her students. "It happens when ordinary people decide they've had enough." The McDonald's where Raj worked became an unlikely symbol of resistance. Customers left him extra-large tips with notes saying, "Thank you for standing up." Local business owners stopped by to offer their support, many admitting they wished they'd done the same years ago. At the town council meeting, normally a quiet affair with low attendance, every seat was filled. People who had never spoken publicly before stood up to demand change. They called for independent oversight of the police department, new policies about abuse of power, and a community review board for citizen complaints. The atmosphere in Pine Valley had shifted fundamentally. People walked a little taller, spoke a little louder, looked each other in the eye more often. The fear that had kept everyone in line for so long was being replaced by something stronger, a sense of shared purpose and responsibility. As one elderly resident put it during a community meeting, "We didn't just have a problem with Alex Mitchell or his father. We had a problem with ourselves, with our silence, our acceptance, our fear. But that stops now. Pine Valley belongs to all of us." The state police investigation moved quickly, uncovering years of misconduct that went far beyond Alex's bullying. Chief Mitchell sat in his home office, surrounded by family photos, as the evidence mounted against him. His phone, once constantly buzzing with messages from people seeking favors, now sat silent. The charges came down like hammer blows. Abuse of power, obstruction of justice, misuse of public resources. Each count represented a time when Chief Mitchell had used his position to protect his son or punish those who stood up to him. The investigation revealed deleted body camera footage, missing complaint forms, and dozens of incidents that had been quietly buried. Alex watched his father's world crumble from the silence of their suddenly emptied house. No more weekend barbecues with the force, no more dropping by the station to hang out in his dad's office. The mirrors in their home seemed to mock him now. Everywhere he looked, he saw the person he'd become, and for the first time, he didn't like what he saw. The juvenile court judge didn't go easy on Alex. "Actions have consequences," she said firmly, looking him straight in the eye. "Real ones, not the kind you made up to frighten others." His sentence included mandatory counseling, community service, and full restitution for all the property he damaged over the years. His first day of community service was at the local food bank. The supervisor, an older woman with kind eyes, but a no-nonsense attitude, handed him a broom. "Start in the back," she said. "And remember, everyone who comes through those doors deserves respect." Alex spent 8 hours sweeping floors, breaking down boxes, and doing all the tasks he used to mock others for doing. The counseling sessions were harder. Dr. Rivera made Alex confront uncomfortable truths about himself. "Power doesn't make you strong," she explained during one session. "Real strength comes from how you treat others, especially when you think no one's watching." Meanwhile, at the police station, the interim chief, Captain Rodriguez, started implementing changes. Complaint forms were made easily accessible. Body cameras couldn't be turned off during interactions with the public. Officers who had enabled Alex's behavior found themselves assigned to desk duty or mandatory retraining. One afternoon, Alex ran into Tommy, one of his old friends, at the grocery store. Tommy quickly turned his cart around, pretending not to see him. The same happened at the mall with other former friends. The loneliness hit him hard. He finally understood how all his victims must have felt when he isolated them. But the real wake-up call came when Alex had to work his first minimum wage job at the car wash. His father's assets were frozen during the investigation, and their family savings went to legal fees. Standing in his work uniform, spraying down cars in the hot sun, Alex thought about all the times he'd looked down on people doing honest work. Some nights, he'd sit in his room reading the comments on the viral video. He didn't recognize the person in that footage anymore, the sneering, entitled bully who thought power meant never having to face consequences. The comments were harsh, but Alex forced himself to read them all, to really understand the impact he'd had on others. During his weekly counseling sessions, Alex started opening up about his mother's death, about how his father's protection had turned into permission to hurt others. "I thought being feared meant being respected," he admitted one day, his voice barely a whisper. "I never realized I was just making myself smaller." The hardest part wasn't the community service or the counseling. It was walking through town and seeing the damage he'd caused. Every person who avoided eye contact, every parent who pulled their child closer when he passed, every former friend who crossed the street to avoid him, they all showed him the true cost of his actions. But somewhere in all this, something started to change in Alex. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, like a tide going out. The anger that had driven him for so long began to fade, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years: shame, and with it, the first real steps toward change. 6 months into his punishment, Alex's transformation became more visible with each passing day. Working at the car wash had taught him humility, but it was his counseling sessions that were slowly rebuilding him from the inside out. The tough exterior he'd worn like armor for so long was cracking, revealing something unexpected underneath: a young man capable of empathy and change. "You're not your past actions," Dr. Rivera told him during one particularly breakthrough session, "but you are responsible for them." Those words stuck with Alex, bouncing around in his mind during long shifts at work, during quiet evenings at home, during sleepless nights when he thought about all the people he'd hurt. The community service hours at the food bank had turned into something more. Even after completing his required time, Alex kept showing up. The older woman who ran the place, Mrs. Baker, noticed the change in him. She'd watch him help elderly visitors carry their bags, play with kids while their parents collected groceries, and stay late to clean without being asked. One rainy Tuesday, a familiar face walked into the food bank, a former classmate whose lunch money Alex used to take. The boy froze when he saw Alex, but instead of the old sneer, he found Alex offering to help him find what he needed. "I'm sorry," Alex said quietly, meaning it more than any words he ever spoken. "For everything." At home, things were different too. His father, now resigned from the force and facing his own legal battles, was finally having real conversations with his son. They talked about Alex's mother, about how her death had left a hole they tried to fill with power instead of healing. "We both lost our way," his father admitted one evening. "But maybe it's not too late to find it again." The surprise came when Raj's mother ended up in Alex's checkout line at the car wash. He wanted to hide, to run, to be anywhere else. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and met her eyes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I want to apologize for what I did to your son." She studied him for a long moment, this boy who had terrorized her child, now standing before her in a work uniform, humbled and sincere. "Raj told me you've been different at school," she said finally, "that you're trying to change. Keep trying." Her words, neither accepting nor rejecting his apology, gave him something he didn't expect: hope. The school hallways were still difficult to navigate. Some students would never forgive him, and Alex understood why. But he kept showing up, kept trying to be better. He joined the peer tutoring program, helping struggling students with their work. It was a small thing, using his knowledge to lift others up instead of pushing them down. During lunch breaks, Alex would sit alone, working on his own studies. Sometimes he'd catch glimpses of Raj with his friends, seeing the easy laughter and genuine friendships he'd never had when he was playing the role of the untouchable bully. It made him think about what real power looked like. Not the ability to make people fear you, but the strength to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, to change. One day, the local newspaper ran a follow-up story about Pine Valley's transformation. They interviewed Alex, not about his past actions, but about his journey toward redemption. "I can't undo what I did," he told a reporter, "but I can work every day to be someone different, someone better." The article included a small detail that caught everyone's attention. Alex had started a support group for other kids struggling with anger and privilege. Every Thursday afternoon, they met in the library, sharing stories and strategies for breaking cycles of harmful behavior. It wasn't much, but it was something real, something honest. Mrs. Chen, watching from her classroom, saw a different young man than the one she'd caught on camera months ago. This Alex walked with his head at a normal height, not raised in arrogance or lowered in shame. He spoke softly, listened more, and seemed to be finding something he'd never had before: peace with himself. 1 year after the viral video that changed everything, Pine Valley had become a different place. The new police chief, a woman who'd worked her way up from patrol officer, had transformed the department. Every complaint was taken seriously. Body cameras were always on, and the old system of favors and fears was replaced with actual justice. The high school held an assembly about bullying and privilege, but it wasn't like the boring presentations of the past. Alex stood at the podium, his hands slightly shaking, facing his entire school. "A year ago, I thought I was untouchable," he began. "I was wrong about that, and about so many other things." The audience sat in complete silence as Alex shared his story. He talked about losing his mother, about using fear to fill the emptiness inside, about learning the hard way that real strength isn't about making others feel small. When he finished, something extraordinary happened. Raj stood up and walked to the podium. "Change is possible," Raj said, standing beside his former bully. "Not just for individuals, but for entire communities. When we speak up, when we stand together, when we choose courage over fear, that's when things get better." The applause that followed wasn't just for their words, but for how far their town had come. At McDonald's, where everything had started, things were different too. Raj had been promoted to shift supervisor, and his college acceptance letters were proudly displayed in the break room. The restaurant had become a symbol of standing up to bullying, with customers often sharing their own stories of finding courage. Alex's father, who'd pled guilty to reduce charges, was serving his community service at the local youth center. He worked with troubled teens, sharing his story as a warning about how power can corrupt. "I failed as a father," he would tell them, "by teaching my son that authority means never having to say you're sorry." The car wash where Alex worked had become an unexpected place of healing. Regular customers who'd once feared the police chief's son now saw a young man working hard, being kind, earning honest respect instead of demanding fear. Some even began requesting him specifically, seeing in his transformation a reason to believe in second chances. Mrs. Chen's classroom had a new addition: a simple poster that read, "Courage starts with one voice." Students would often gather there after school, not just for homework help, but to talk about making their community better. She'd watch them, these young people who'd learned early lessons about power and responsibility, and feel hopeful about the future. The support group Alex started had grown. They met in the library every week, sharing stories and strategies. "It's not about forgetting what happened," Alex would say. It's about learning from it, about choosing to be different. Kids who struggled with anger, with privilege, with the temptation to bully others, found understanding and guidance there. One sunny afternoon, Alex was washing cars when Raj's mother pulled in again. This time, she stepped out of her car and handed him an envelope. Inside was an invitation to Raj's graduation party. "My son suggested inviting you," she said simply. "He said everyone deserves a chance to show they've changed." The town council meetings, once sparsely attended, now overflowed with engaged citizens. People learned that their voices mattered, that standing up for what's right might be scary, but it was always worth it. The old power structures were gone, replaced by something stronger, a community that looked out for all its members. On graduation day, as both Alex and Raj received their diplomas, the applause was equal. Not because people had forgotten, but because they'd witnessed real transformation. Alex was headed to community college, planning to study social work. Raj had a full scholarship to study pre-med. Both had learned lessons no textbook could teach. Pine Valley had changed, not just on the surface, but deep down where it matters most. The story of a bully's transformation became part of the town's identity, a reminder that change is possible, that it's never too late to choose a different path, and that sometimes the greatest power lies not in making others fear you, but in having the courage to become someone better.